Some moments transcend entertainment. Simon Cowell had judged talent for 2 decades, but nothing prepared him for the 78-year-old man who shuffled onto the Got Talent stage that November evening, holding the hand of a woman lost in her own world. His name was Harold Peterson, silver-haired, wearing a carefully pressed navy suit that hung loose on his thin frame. Beside him walked Margaret, his wife of 52 years. She wore a pale blue dress, her white hair neatly styled, but her eyes held the distant look of someone no longer fully present. Harold held her hand with infinite tenderness. He guided her toward center stage, speaking to her in whispers too quiet for the audience to hear. She walked beside him obediently, but without comprehension. The audience applauded politely, but there was confusion in the air. Simon sat at the judges' table, arms crossed, but his expression was already different. 20 years of experience had taught him to read people quickly. The host approached them with his usual warm smile, but even he seemed to sense that this required a gentler touch. "Welcome to Britain's Got Talent," he said softly. "Please tell us your names." "Harold Peterson," he said steadily. "And this is my wife, Margaret. We're from Yorkshire. What brings you here today, Harold?" Harold's grip tightened on Margaret's hand. She stood beside him, looking past everything. "Margaret has Alzheimer's disease," Harold said quietly. "Diagnosed 3 years ago. Most days now she doesn't know who I am. Sometimes she asks me where Harold is, where her husband went." The audience fell silent. Simon's arms slowly uncrossed, his full attention focused on the elderly couple. "But there's one thing," Harold continued, tears visible in his eyes. "One song we used to dance to every Friday night for 51 years. Our wedding song. Sometimes, when I play it, the fog lifts for just a moment, and she comes back to me." Simon's professional composure was cracking. He'd built his career on maintaining emotional distance, on being the tough judge who told hard truths. But there was something about Harold's quiet dignity, about the way he held his wife's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world, that was dismantling his defenses. "What will you be performing for us today?" the host asked gently. Harold looked at Margaret, who was now humming softly to herself, some melody only she could hear. "I'm going to dance with my wife," he said. "Maybe for the last time she'll truly be with me. I know it's not singing or magic tricks or what people usually do here, but it's what we have left. And I thought maybe if I could share it, other people might understand that love doesn't end just because the mind starts to forget." The host nodded, clearly moved. He stepped back, leaving Harold and Margaret alone at center stage. The theater was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. Harold positioned himself in front of Margaret, taking both her hands in his. He looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of recognition, any flicker of the woman who had shared his life for more than half a century. "Margaret, love," he whispered, his voice carrying through the theater's perfect acoustics. "Can you hear the music starting?" The opening notes of "The Way You Look Tonight" began to flow through the speakers. Not the Frank Sinatra version most people knew, but the original 1936 Fred Astaire recording, the same version they danced to at their wedding reception in 1972. The song was gentle, romantic, filled with the kind of innocent optimism that belonged to a different era. Harold began to sway, holding Margaret's hands, trying to coax her into the movement. She stood still for a moment, staring at him with that distant expression. The audience watched in painful silence as Harold danced alone, moving to music that once moved them both. His steps were careful, slowed by arthritis and age, but they were practiced. You could see in his movements the ghost of a younger man who had once spun his bride around dance floors, who had held her close during slow songs at wedding receptions and anniversary parties and quiet Friday nights in their living room. Then, as the melody swelled, something extraordinary began to happen. Margaret's fingers twitched in Harold's hands. Her head tilted slightly, as if she were trying to hear something just beyond perception. Her feet, moving almost imperceptibly at first, began to remember. The audience held its breath as Margaret's body responded to memories her conscious mind could no longer access. Her posture straightened slightly. Her steps, tentative at first, began to match Harold's rhythm. And then she looked at him. Really looked at him. The vacant expression cleared from her eyes like morning fog burning away in sunlight. She saw Harold, not as a stranger, not as a caregiver, but as Harry, her Harry, the man who had asked her to marry him beside a lake in Yorkshire 54 years ago. "Harry," she whispered, and the theater's sound system picked up every nuance of wonder and recognition in her voice. Harold's face crumpled with joy and heartbreak all at once. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he nodded. "Yes, love. It's me. It's your Harry." Margaret's arms came up to his shoulders. She fell into the dance position they had assumed thousands of times before, her head finding its place against his chest, her body remembering what her mind had lost. They danced together, slowly, carefully, as if they were afraid that too much movement might shatter the spell. Margaret hummed along with the music, her voice soft but clear. Harold closed his eyes and held her, swaying to the rhythm of a song that had become the soundtrack to their entire life together. The audience was crying openly now. In the front rows, women clutched tissues. Men wiped their eyes on their sleeves. This wasn't entertainment. This was witnessing something sacred, something that belonged in the privacy of a couple's living room, but was somehow perfect under the bright lights of a television stage. At the judges' table, Simon Cowell did something he had never done in 20 years of judging. He stood up, not slowly or deliberately, but suddenly, as if something inside him couldn't remain seated anymore. The other judges turned to look at him, surprised, but he was focused entirely on the dancing couple. He walked around the table and onto the stage, but he didn't interrupt. He simply stood at the edge of the performance space, witnessing something that was changing him in real time. The song reached its crescendo. Margaret lifted her head from Harold's chest and looked directly into his eyes. The clarity in her gaze was complete, total. She was entirely present, entirely herself. "I love you, Harry," she said, her voice strong and sure. "I've always loved you. Even when I can't remember your name, even when I don't know where I am. I love you." "And I love you, Margaret," Harold replied, his voice breaking. "I've loved you every day for 54 years, and I'll love you every day until I take my last breath." They continued to dance as the music played, and everyone in the theater understood that they were witnessing something unrepeatable. This wasn't a performance that could be rehearsed or recreated. This was lightning in a bottle, a moment of grace that happened once and could never happen again. The song began to fade. Margaret and Harold slowed their movement, holding each other close as the final notes played. For one perfect, crystalline moment, they stood together in complete understanding, completely in love, completely present to each other and to the life they had built together. Then, as the music ended, the fog began to return to Margaret's eyes. The confusion crept back across her features. She looked around the theater, at the lights, at the audience, as if seeing them for the first time. "Where are we, Harold?" she asked, using his formal name now, the way she did when she didn't quite remember who he was. Harold smiled through his tears, still holding her hands. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be, love." Simon approached them, his usual composure completely gone. His face was wet with tears he made no attempt to hide. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Harold," he said. "Margaret. In 20 years of judging talent, in 20 years of seeing every kind of performance imaginable, I have never ever seen anything more beautiful than what you just shared with us." He turned to face the other judges, then back to the audience. "This isn't about talent," he continued. "This is about something infinitely more important. This is about love that transcends illness, love that survives when everything else fails, love that finds a way to shine through even the darkest circumstances." He walked to the golden buzzer and placed his hand on it, but before pressing it, he turned back to Harold and Margaret. "You came here to dance with your wife, Harold, but you've given us something much more valuable. You've reminded everyone watching what really matters. You've shown us that love is the only force in the universe stronger than loss." He pressed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. The iconic music blared. The lights turned gold, bathing Harold and Margaret in warm, celebratory light. But the atmosphere wasn't celebratory in the traditional sense. It felt like a benediction, a blessing, a recognition of something holy. The audience erupted in the longest standing ovation in the show's history. 2,000 people rose as one, applauding not for entertainment value, but for the privilege of witnessing pure, unconditional love in action. But Harold only had eyes for Margaret. He held her gently as the golden confetti fell around them like snow, protecting her from the chaos of celebration, keeping her safe in the bubble of his love. Simon remained on stage, applauding along with everyone else, his face still wet with tears. When the ovation finally began to quiet, he spoke again. "Harold and Margaret Peterson, everyone, proving that some performances transcend talent and become something eternal." After the cameras stopped rolling, the celebration continued. Harold and Margaret sat in chairs that the production crew brought out. Simon sat with them, talking quietly with Harold about love and loss. Before they left, Simon gave Harold his personal phone number. "When you need someone to talk to," Simon said quietly, "call me." Harold's audition became the most watched moment in Got Talent history. It started conversations about love, aging, and caring for those whose minds are disappearing. Harold and Margaret continued their Tuesday afternoon dances at home. Some days Margaret remembered the steps, some days she didn't. But Harold danced with her anyway. Margaret passed away peacefully 18 months later in Harold's arms as "The Way You Look Tonight" played softly on the radio. That's not television. That's the human heart in all its fragile, powerful, eternal glory.